Students, welcome back to Econ 11, Political Science 11. So this week we're going to be covering a little bit more of economic concepts. We're almost done with this lecture, or with these slides. So today we're just going to talk about population growth, and we're just going to summarize everything that we've talked about throughout this semester so far. Alright, so population growth. We know that if you have a large population, sometimes it might be hard to handle in terms of resources. So today we're going to talk about the benefits, like the pros, and also the cons that come with having a large population. So to start, population growth, this is a big thing in modern day era. A lot of environmental scientists, economists argue that we aren't able to sustain this level of growth, and in some places in the world, such as Japan, you do see a decrease in population growth, and some places such as India and China, you see an increase in population growth. So large populations, they're very frequent in today's time. So with large populations, you have more workers to produce more goods and services. So if you have a larger labor force participation rate and also labor force, you're going to be able to produce much more. So how does this affect your GDP? It will increase your GDP, and if you increase your GDP, you're going to be able to increase your living standard as well. So you'll have a large total output of goods and services, and along with this, if you have a large population, you're also going to have a large consumer base. More people are going to be purchasing products, demanding different types of products. So in a sense, it is good to have a large population. Now, if you think of it in terms of taxes, would you want a higher population or a higher population or a lower population? For the most part, you can make an argument for both, but in terms of taxes to build up revenue, it's most likely a large population. So in the United States, we have a large tax base, and with this, the government gets a huge portion of taxes that they can pump back into the economy. So in this case, it is good. Now, if you don't have a large population, or if you don't have a population of individuals that are working where you can tax them, this is going to have a negative effect on your economy as well as your country itself if you're trying to produce, expand, invest into yourself or into other countries. So that is one thing that you can look at as well. So population growth may affect living standards in 3 specific ways. So we're going to talk about these 3, but there's various other ones that you can look at. So population growth can be affected by natural resources. So over 200 years ago, Malthus argued that population growth will strain society's ability to provide for itself, and mankind is doomed forever to live in poverty. So we have the scientists who made this assumption back in the day. And again, to an extent, it's true, but also a lot has changed from 200 years ago. Now, since then, the world population has increased 6-fold, and living standards have increased. So something that he failed to account for is technological progress and productivity growth. So when he made this assumption, basically this assumption was based on what was given at the time. He wasn't taking into account forward progress, the catch-up effect, human capital, technical knowledge, and so forth. So over time, we did see an increase in population growth. We did see an increase in standard of living in the poorest of countries as well as the richest of countries. So population growth and natural resources is a huge environmental issue as well. So people that argue that we don't have enough resources available to accommodate everyone, or because our population is growing so much that it's impacting our environment, so global warming, CO2 emissions, all of these are perfect examples of how natural resources and population growth go hand in hand. Now, if your economy becomes much more strained and you don't have enough resources available for your population, this is going to have a negative effect. So let's just say our population is growing so much that we don't have enough teachers to accommodate students. So let's just say the ratio for teacher to student increases. So let's just say on average one teacher would have 20 students, and now after this population growth, now we see one teacher is in charge of 45 students. So this is a huge change, and this affects learning. And for some of you, if you have come from an impacted high school, elementary school, you know that with a larger class, it's harder for a teacher to have one-on-one instruction. The lesser the class size, the more information you can get across and have individualized help. So that's a micro way of thinking about it. Also, if we see a huge increase in population, eventually these individuals are going to age, and these individuals are also going to purchase vehicles or other types of technology. And because of this, you'll see an increase in emissions. With the increase in emissions, this destroys our atmosphere, and because of this, you see a negative effect as well. All right, so diluting the capital stock, this is another example. So if you look back to our productivity, we had our production function. We're assuming we have labor and capital and level of technology. So with a higher population growth compared to our capital stock, so if we have more workers than actual technology tools available for them to use, you're not going to be as productive. Again, you want to be able to keep the ratio very similar. So if each worker has some form of capital available to them, they're going to increase their productivity. But if they decrease, if there's a decrease in capital stock, or if there's an increase in population growth, you're going to see a mismanaged amount of resources, and you're not going to be able to attain this overall production that you desire. So because of this, because people don't have enough capital available to them, they're not going to be able to produce as much, so productivity decreases. And we know that productivity is associated with GDP. If you're not producing as much, your living standard also goes down. So again, you want to have an ample amount of capital available for your workers. So you want a good amount of capital and a good amount of labor in order to reach your potential, to be able to produce more. So for example, in India, we have a huge population, we have a higher L, and there's not enough capital to go around. Again, if there was enough capital for that huge population, you would see a huge increase in production, and they would be able to produce much, much more than other countries due to having this much of a population. So to combat this, many developing countries use policies to control population growth. So there are government regulations. For example, China had the one-child law. Again, reducing population was one of their goals because of this, amongst other things that were wrong with this policy. Increased awareness of birth control. So this is another big thing in lesser developed countries. There's not a lot of education available for these individuals, as well as no form of effective contraceptives. So birth control, condoms, these are all things that are intertwined with a huge spike in population growth. So we do see huge population growth in these lesser developed countries, and this could be one of the reasons. And also is equal opportunities for women. So if there's not equal opportunities for women, they're more likely to conceive a child. And from there, if we do provide equal opportunities, if we do promote women to higher positions, studies have shown they're less likely to have a child or much later. So if you promote female literacy to raise opportunity costs of having babies. So if we change their opportunity costs so it's much more beneficial for them to go out and find a job and work and get promoted, what they're going to be giving up is having a baby, because again, they want to have a successful career, and the opportunity cost of that is having a child. I'm not saying having a child is bad, but it does, you are out of the workforce for a certain amount of time. Again, things are changing throughout history, and this is another big thing, is if we promote education for women in these lesser developed countries. This is another way to reduce your population growth or help control it. Okay, and then, so also if there's a faster population growth, as I mentioned before, there's more children, and if there's more children, there's a greater strain on the educational system. So if there's more students per teacher, that's harder for every teacher to teach effectively or have a grasp on what people know, what they don't know, and so forth. So countries with the fastest population growth tend to have lower educational attainment. So if we look at India, if we look at some countries in Africa, in South America, China, you see educational attainment is lower because of this huge population growth. Again, it's hard for you to go out and get an education because there might be less resources. You might not have the best quality of education as well. So we just kind of talked about this with the brain drain. And also So next, should we promote or discourage population growth? So this is a very touchy subject for some individuals. Some people are for Controlling population, some people are against controlling the population. So again, I want you guys to formulate your own opinion. If you would like to share, drop a comment below. I will give you extra credit for doing so. So I just want to hear your thoughts. Should we promote or discourage population growth? Okay, so a little bit more about population growth. Promoting technological progress. So this is one of the positives of this. So if our population grows much more, the engine for technological progress and economic prosperity also grows. So if we have more people, assuming everyone gets an education, again, we're holding a huge assumption. If everyone gets an education, you're going to have more scientists, more inventors, more engineers. And because of this, we're going to have more frequent discoveries. So if we increase our population and they become educated and they contribute to society, we're going to see a benefit in the long run. So the cost outweighs the benefit. The benefit meaning that we have more discoveries. We might have a cure for certain drugs, a much more efficient way of producing a product, and so forth. So again, that's another way to look at it as well. So Michael Kremer, he's human history. He focuses on human history, and he looks at growth rates. So growth rates have increased as the world's population has increased, and this could be attributed to what we were just talking about. Now, more populated regions grew faster than less populated ones. So if you look at a densely populated area, they're growing much faster. Now, if you think of Los Angeles, and then if you think of a small city like Tulare, which is in the central valley of California, you'll see a huge difference in growth. So just compare a populated area to a lesser populated areas. You can figure out some of the distinctions. What are the impacts of having a huge population? What are the impacts of having a low population? And so forth. So another thing I wanted to mention was Japan. So Japan has a decreasing population growth. Now, some people might see this as a good thing. They're not growing as fast, but other people see this as a bad thing as well. So it's a bad thing because the working class is aging. And if your population growth is decreasing, that means there's not many children being born. And because of this, your working class in the future, your production or your potential in the future is decreasing. Now, we also have all these resources in Japan dedicated to the population. Now, if we have a population that isn't fully utilizing the optimal amount of resources, you're going to see a decrease in production and also a mismanagement of resources. You have resources that aren't being used to its full potential because lack of population. So it's a push or pull between this. Also, other countries such as Russia has implemented policies where they promote having children. There might be a tax write-off, a benefit, something that helps incentivize production. So in their case, they want to promote and increase the population due to, let's just say they want a better tax base, they want more, if they want to create more economic prosperity in the future, reinvest into their own citizens, and so forth. So again, there's various examples of this across the globe. Now, this is just a review activity. So I want you to list the determinants of productivity and list 3 policies that attempt to raise living standards by increasing one of the determinants of productivity. So here we have the determinants of productivity. So physical capital per worker. So if each worker has more capital available to them, they're going to be able to produce more. So just think of you at one of your jobs, and if you had no technology, no tools available to you. Let's just say you're a cashier. You don't have a cash register, you don't have a pen, you don't have a paper. All you can do is math in your head. That is it. Now, again, people can do this, but you probably won't be able to be as efficient. Now, let's say I introduce a cash register. That just reduces your time in half. So again, the more capital you have available to you, the more productive you are. All right, so human capital per worker. Again, we talked about human capital before. Human capital is just your knowledge of things. So for example, if you have an education, the more education you have, the more skills you possess to help you produce much more. So that's another way of increasing your productivity, is if your society is educated. Now, would you want an educated society or an uneducated society? For the most part, you always want an educated society. Educated society meaning higher educational attainment, and because of this, everyone's going to be a much more contributing member to society, less crime, higher productivity, higher living standard. The next one is natural resources available per worker. If we increase the natural resources available per worker, we can produce much more as well. So, for example, if we have more timber or more wood available to us, our lumber industry is going to be much higher. Now, natural resources is a little tricky. There's a whole field dedicated to it, natural resource economics, because again, some of these natural resources, it's a fixed amount. You can't, if you deplete all of your resources just in one day or in one time period, it's harder to get that same amount of benefit in the next time period. So policies. Oh, and also the last one is this is technological knowledge. So it's one thing having capital available to you or technology. It's another thing to be able to understand how to use it to maximize your production. So, for example, if you have a cash register but you haven't been trained on it whatsoever, if you were trained on it, you'd be much more productive, much more efficient. If you're trying to figure it out as you go, it might take you some time. So that time period of having technical knowledge is going to help you produce much more. So it's important to have physical capital. It's important to have human capital. It's important to have natural resources. And it's also important to have technological knowledge. Now, are these all a lot to ask for? 100% yes. Not every country has an abundant amount of each. So again, scarcity and what we do with those scarce amount of resources. Now, policies to boost productivity. You can encourage saving and investments to raise physical capital per worker. So if we encourage firms or individuals to invest into companies or to expand their businesses, they're going to see more capital available to them. And also if we encourage investments from abroad, so whether it be foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, countries are investing into your country by providing you with land, labor, capital, whatever it may be. It might be providing you with the human capital, so the knowledge or the skill set to be able to use technology, also technical knowledge or technological knowledge, providing public education. So if you want to increase and make your society much more educated, that's another way you can go about it, is having a public school system that offers an adequate education to help produce more in the future. Also, patents and laws to help increase technological knowledge. So if you have patent laws and grants and copyright, you have rules and regulations that protect the producer and also the consumer. Because of this, everyone has incentive to go out and invent and produce much more. Also, one other way is to control population growth. If we control population growth, our labor won't be increasing as much, and if our labor decreases and our capital increases, each worker is going to have more capital available to them. Sorry, I cannot talk today. So those are the policies to boost productivity. Just know a couple, be able to explain some. Now, are natural resources a limit to growth? So some argue that population growth is depleting the Earth's non-renewable resources. So non-renewable resources, for example, oil. We don't have an infinite amount of oil on this Earth. We don't have an infinite amount of water. All these are examples of non-renewable resources. So again, this can limit the growth in living standards. So the whole idea is, if we have more technological progress, if we have more knowledge, we can come up with ways to solve this problem. So what I always say is, anything that potentially harms your profits in the long run as a firm, you're going to figure out a way around it. So an example of this would be, because of gas, we had hybrid cars. Hybrid cars use less gas, and they went around this problem. So let's just say, for example, we run out of oil completely. Again, just an example. We have an alternative. We have hybrid cars. Also, better insulation in home reduces the energy required to heat or cool them. So again, anything that helps reduce your profits in the long run, you can figure out a way around it, and you have a problem or a solution for this problem. If you can fix it, you're going to protect your profits. If you can't, there's going to be a huge issue. So for example, in the world, bluefin tuna is a very prized fish, especially for sushi. So if it's fresh or if it was farm raised, there's a huge issue between that. So between the US market and the Japanese market, there's no rules and regulations on where you can fish, because these bluefin tuna or these freshly or basically wild bluefin tuna that are raised in the wild, they migrate from the United States all the way around to Japan and back. So there's a little trail that they take, and it's a non-renewable resource. If you fish all the bluefin tuna, the ones raised in the wild, you're gonna have less of these available to you in the long run. So the way producers fought off this problem by obviously the whole incentive was to protect their profits. And in protecting their profits, they came up with a solution. What they did was they're farming this bluefin tuna in these artificially grown farms in the ocean. So again, they're growing them in farms. They're not wildly caught. Now, some say the taste is different. Some say the presentation, all this stuff is different. But they're protecting their profits in the long run. So that's another way of counteracting this. There's a really interesting Vice documentary that I'll share with the class next week, and we'll talk about it. It's a really interesting piece. All right. So market economies, scarcity is reflected in market prices. If the world were running out of natural resources, their prices would be rising over time. So again, it would be a decrease in supply, prices increase. In real terms, the prices of most natural resources are stable or falling. So again, we figure out ways so we don't always extract all of our non-renewable resources. We do them in increments, because if we did everything in one time period, you would see a huge decrease, and this has an impact on the overall economy. Now, how this ties into international political economy is because if your country is focused on extracting just natural resources, if that's their main calling card, that's their cash cow, that's what they're trading with other countries, the second you start running out of it, it's harder for you to make a profit in the long run, because you have less resources available. So you need to either invest into a different part of your economy, build up an infant industry. There's other ways to go about it. So it appears that our ability to conserve these resources is growing more rapidly than their supplies are dwindling. Again, we want to protect our profits, and the way we do this is figure out a solution, whether it be come up with a synthetic version of this or other resources that we have an abundant amount of and repurpose it to act the same. So for example, if we have electric cars compared to gas cars, there's different ways to go about it. Okay, so in conclusion, in the long run, living standards are determined by productivity. The more productive you are, the higher your living standards. It's good to have high living standards because you have better education, better healthcare, better infrastructure, less corrupt government, and so forth. Policies that affect determinants of productivity will therefore affect the next generation's living standards. So stuff we do today is going to have an impact on the next generation and the generation after that. So that's why it's all important. One of these determinants, saving and investment. Okay, so another summary. There are great differences across countries in living standards and growth rates. Some countries are growing much faster, some are growing much slower, some are declining in growth, and also living standards. So we talked about different countries already. Productivity is the main determinant of living standards in the long run. Productivity depends on physical, human capital, natural resources, and also technological knowledge. Those are the 4 factors. Make sure you remember those for the final exam. Now, growth in these factors, especially technological progress, causes growth in living standards over the long run. So if you increase any of these, you're going to increase productivity in the long run. All right, so policies can affect the following, each which has important effects on growth. So savings and investment or international trade, education, health and nutrition, property rights, political stability, research and development, and population growth. So you can implement various policies. So when I give you an example on the final, I'll give you a scenario and you tell me how or which area is this going to affect. So let's just say I increase investment to research and development. It's going to affect research and development, and in the long run, you're going to see an increase in productivity because of this investment. You're going to be able to produce more products, or something much more efficient will come out of this. Now, because of diminishing returns to capital, growth from investment eventually slows or drops, and poor countries may catch up to rich ones. So this is looking at the catch-up effect. This is all applicable in international political economy because we're comparing different countries, how they interact with each other, and a lot of it's through trade, so through markets. So if the United States, we get more and more capital available to us, it's only going to help us so much. So you also need to promote labor in order to you also need to improve labor. So if you have more workers or increased population growth, you'll have more capital per worker, and because of that, you'll be able to produce much more. Now, because we're such a developed country, it's not going to have that much of an impact compared to a third world country, for example, let's say Iran. If we introduce a new type of technology, it's going to help them catch up to us. So when you think of the catch-up effect, think of the curve. As they catch up to us, there's less and less of impact of new capital. Okay, so that's going to be it for this slideshow. If you guys have any questions, drop a comment. Make sure you do the extra credit, which was said in the middle of the video. Please attend the Zoom sessions. Other than that, I hope you guys are staying healthy. I will see you guys soon. Thank you.